We are joined by Jamil Jaffer, founder and executive director of the National Security Institute. Jamil, always great to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Natasha.
You know, when you see these protests of the mobilization order and the war itself inside of Russia, what does that say about the Russian people's perception of this conflict?
Well, you know, Natasha, I think it demonstrates that Vladimir Putin's support at home is getting soft. He was afraid this would happen, and so he knew that when he issued this mobilization order for 300,000 troops, that might cause issues. And we've already seen protests, as you noted, as your correspondent noted, cropping up there in St. Petersburg and Moscow. We've also seen Russian men trying to leave the country to get out ahead of this call-up order.
And, you know, we've been seeing reports of the Kremlin in chaos in some cases. We know that there are drafting mistakes, men being called up who either have no military experience or should be out of the age range entirely, reports of male citizens fleeing the country. In this moment, is Russia losing the war? And is that why Putin announced this order in the first place?
Well, certainly Russia's faced some significant losses in places like Kharkiv and the like, where they've lost actual territory. They have consolidated, though, their hold over Donetsk and Luhansk. They still hold Kherson and other parts down that sort of land bridge down towards Crimea, which they took in 2014. And Vladimir Putin is now trying to gin up these protests and these votes for secession from Ukraine and annexation by Russia in an effort to demonstrate that he has political legitimacy, which he clearly doesn't have. But he's looking to do that, and frankly, getting those votes in Ukraine at the barrel of guns with his troops there in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, you're referencing the sham referendums there, and the path forward there is that if the vote does go forward, which it most certainly will, that those regions should join Russia, then the counteroffensive in Ukraine can be viewed as an attack on Russia, and Putin has grounds to then take action there. You know, Ukrainian President Zelensky says he does not think that Putin is bluffing with his latest nuclear threat. How seriously should the U.S. and its allies be taking this threat?
Well, look, I think the U.S. and our allies are taking it very seriously. You've seen President Biden now at least twice this week alone warn Vladimir Putin about the potential use of tactical nuclear weapons. I tend to think the risk is low. At the same time, not being clear about this, not being clear what the consequences would be. You know, President Biden said our response will be calibrated based on what the Russians do. We need to be clear that if Vladimir Putin uses tactical nuclear weapons or any kind, that we would go in directly and remove him from Ukraine, and there would be significant consequences on Russia itself. That needs to be really clear. We can't accept any use of nuclear weapons at all.
So you think the administration needs to make a stronger statement than it has already?
I think that couldn't hurt. Certainly, I think being very clear, we weren't clear about what would happen if they went to Ukraine. That ambiguity allowed Vladimir Putin to go in. We need to be very clear there will be an extremely, extremely decisive response from us and our European allies. It's not just on the United States, it requires European allies as well.
I hear you. And I'm wondering if we have enough time to get into what's going on in Iran right now, because there's also major news happening there. Violent unrest continuing in cities across that country right now. Protests, of course, spurned by the death of a 22-year-old woman who was in police custody. We know at least 13 people have been killed in those protests, and Iran now criticizing the U.S. and the U.K. for their actions in the wake of those protests. So, Jamil, these protests happening in a country known for cracking down hard on such demonstrations, will these protests and sympathy demonstrations around the world force Iran to change its policies?
You know, one can only hope, but I doubt that we'll see that. Unfortunately, as you point out correctly, the Iranian regime has a long-standing practice of cracking down aggressively on protests. If we don't do enough to support these protesters and really protect their right to protest and make clear that we will be supportive of them, you know, they will be once again crushed like the earlier revolution there in Iran. The earlier, protests, the green protests were crushed years back. And that will be really unfortunate. The Iranian people have a legitimate gripe against their government, which is not free and not inclusive. And that's a real problem for a country that really has a lot of young people that are very passionate about these issues.
Absolutely. Jamil Jaffer, certainly appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Natasha.